I'm going to tell you the habit right now. No dramatic buildup, no suspense. The habit that pulled me out of financial rock bottom is writing down every single thing I spend, every day by hand, in a $1 notebook from Target. That's it. That's the whole secret. And I can already see you reaching for that back button. Trust me, I get it. When someone first told me this, I had the exact same reaction. I thought, seriously? My financial life is falling apart. I've got credit card debt I can't look at, and your advice is to write stuff in a notebook like it's 5th grade. That's like telling someone with anxiety to just relax. Deeply, sincerely hated it. And that's exactly why it worked. If you're at the point I was 2 years ago where checking your bank balance makes your stomach drop, where you can't explain where your paycheck went, where you've stopped believing that next month I'll actually get it together, stay with me. Because I'm not going to tell you how to get rich. I'm going to tell you how to stop drowning. And honestly, that's the more valuable story. But first, some context. Because without it, you won't understand why a grown adult was sitting at his kitchen table every night with a ballpoint pen, hating every second and showing up anyway. 2 years ago, my financial situation looked like this. Good salary. Not Silicon Valley money, but solid. $64,000 a year, which in Austin, Texas, felt like it should be enough. More than enough. Enough to live on, save a little, not stress every time someone suggested grabbing dinner. But I stressed because by the 15th of every month I was basically broke. Not a little tight broke, checking if I can afford a $12 burrito broke. I had 2 credit cards and an Amazon store card, not because I planned to have 3 lines of credit, but because each one got opened to cover the last one. Chase Freedom, maxed at $6,000. Capital One, maxed at $4,000. Amazon card, $2,000, at 29% APR, used exclusively for things I'd convinced myself were deals. You know the type. A gadget that was 40% off, but I didn't need it. A kitchen appliance I'd use all the time. A course I bought and never opened. The classic. My total credit card debt was sitting at $12,000, and I was paying minimums on all 3. If you know anything about minimum payments, you know that's basically just paying interest and pretending you're making progress. I had turned off notifications from every banking app on my phone. Not because I was busy, because every notification felt like a punch in the gut. Transaction approved. Your balance is minimum payment due. I didn't want to see it. It was easier not to know. And that word not know, that's the key. I was living in a financial fog. I had a rough sense of what I earned. A rough sense of what I spent. But the space between those 2 rough numbers, that space was where my money disappeared. And I had no idea what was in it. I couldn't go grocery shopping without low-key anxiety. Couldn't go out with friends without quietly calculating in my head whether I could actually cover it. Couldn't fall asleep without running through numbers I didn't even know precisely. You know what the most frustrating part is? The anxiety was constant but vague. I was scared, but I couldn't name exactly what I was scared of, because that would have required actually looking at the situation, and I wasn't ready to look. My girlfriend noticed before I said a word, not because I told her. I was working pretty hard to project. Everything's fine. She noticed in the small things, that I'd stopped suggesting we do stuff on weekends, that I tensed up weirdly whenever vacation came up in conversation, that I was snapping at her over things that had nothing to do with money. Money isn't just numbers in an account. It's the background noise of your whole life. And when that background turns dark, everything else does too. I'd tried every app. Mint, downloaded it, set up the categories, used it for 4 days, then forgot my login. WNAB started the free trial, watched 2 tutorial videos, and bailed because it felt like a part-time job. I made a Google spreadsheet with color-coded categories, used it for 11 days. I tried the cash envelope method, physically putting 20s in labeled envelopes for groceries, gas, entertainment. That lasted about a week and a half before the envelopes all emptied out, and I stopped refilling them. I even tried just being more mindful about spending, which is the most useless piece of financial advice ever invented. That one lasted until the first Friday after payday. Every time I quit, I added another layer of shame to the pile. And shame is uniquely destructive when it comes to money, because it doesn't make you try harder, it makes you avoid the problem more. The cycle goes bad with money. Feel ashamed, avoid looking at the situation gets worse, feel more ashamed, every month on loop. And then a friend said something to me. We were at a bar, couple of beers in, and I'd made some offhand comment about being broke again. And he asked me very directly, the way only a good friend will, do you actually know where your money goes? Not roughly? Actually, I said. Yeah. More or less, he said. More or less doesn't count. Try writing everything down for a month. Every single thing. Every coffee. Every Amazon order. Every Venmo at night. Before you go to sleep. Open a notebook and write it all out. I told him that was the dumbest advice I'd ever heard. That I'd tried the apps and nothing worked. That what I needed wasn't to track spending. I needed to earn more. He shrugged and said, "Okay, but try it anyway. It's not like things can get much worse. It's not like things can get much worse. That is not motivational language. That is rock bottom language. And that's exactly where I was. So I tried it. What happened next? I genuinely did not see coming. I remember the first evening clearly. I got home from work, sat down at the kitchen table, opened a brand new notebook, $1 at Target, thin, with a slightly bent cover because I'd shoved it in my bag, clicked open a pen, and just sat there for a moment. Because I didn't know where to start, I opened my Chase app, and that's when it got uncomfortable. Because there's a difference between knowing, in an abstract way, that you spend too much, and actually seeing the list. Specific items, specific amounts, times and store names and transaction IDs. I started copying it down. Starbucks, $6.50. Lunch at the Tex-Mex place by work, $14.80. DoorDash delivery in the evening, because I didn't have time to cook, $31.20, which included $7 in fees and a tip I added automatically without thinking. An Amazon charge I didn't immediately recognize and had to click through to identify. It was a phone case for a phone I'd replaced 6 months ago, somehow still subscribed to a protection plan. $9 a month for a phone I no longer owned. I kept going down the list. Spotify, $10.99. Netflix, $17.99. Hulu, $7.99. Some app called Calm that I downloaded during a stressful week and apparently never canceled, $69.99 annual charge just hitting now. A gym membership at $45 a month for a gym I had been to exactly twice since January. A random $4.99 charge from an app I couldn't name. By the time I tallied it up, I'd spent $19.4 that day. One Wednesday in March. Not a weekend, not a special occasion, not a birthday dinner. A regular Wednesday. $194. Multiply that by 30, and I already knew the math didn't work. I told myself it was an outlier. Tomorrow would be less. Tomorrow was $87. The day after was $143, because I filled up the gas tank. Day 4 was $112. By the end of the first week, I had 7 pages of entries and an increasingly sick feeling in my stomach. Not because the numbers were catastrophically wrong, but because every single entry made complete sense in the moment it happened, and none of them felt like a choice. That's the thing nobody tells you about tracking your spending. The pain isn't the big stuff. Rent, car payment, utilities, those are fixed. You already know about those. The pain is the small stuff. The $6.50 coffee, the $12 lunch, the DoorDash habit, the 2 random Amazon packages that showed up this week that you'd already forgotten ordering. Each one is nothing. Each one is just this one time. But 20 of them in a column every week is somewhere between $400 and $700. On things you can't quite remember. I ended the first week with one thought. This is the most unpleasant homework assignment I've ever given myself. Week 2 was worse, because the shock of the first week had worn off. In week 1, at least, there was some dark novelty to it, seeing the real numbers for the first time, like turning the lights on in a room you'd been navigating in the dark. But by week 2, I knew what I was going to see, and I had to sit down and look at it anyway. I remember a specific Thursday evening, toward the end of week 2. Rough day at work, came home tired and a little resentful, sat down with the notebook, and somewhere in the middle of writing out the day's entries, something shifted. The tiredness turned into anger, but not at my job or the day, at myself, at every line in that notebook. Why did you DoorDash again? You have eggs in the fridge. Why did you take an Uber to a place that's a 20-minute walk? Why did you buy a book on Amazon, the 3rd book this month, when you haven't finished the last 2? Why did you get the venti when you could have gotten a tall? I was prosecuting myself. Prosecutor, judge, and defendant, all sitting at the same kitchen table, and the verdict every night was the same. Guilty of being careless, guilty of being lazy, guilty of being the kind of person who can't get his act together. I want to pause here and say something important, because I think this is where most people quit. If you've ever tried budgeting and stopped, chances are you didn't stop because you were lazy. You stopped because it hurt. Looking at your spending means looking at your decisions. And when your decisions haven't been great, that means looking at your mistakes. Every evening, in a numbered list, with dollar amounts. Nobody talks about this. Everyone says just track your spending. It's easy. There are great apps for it. Nobody says, and by the way, prepare to feel genuinely awful about yourself for a couple of weeks, because this process forces you to be honest in a way you've been avoiding. And honesty is supposed to be uncomfortable. That's what I wish someone had told me. Not the method. The method takes 10 seconds to explain. I wish someone had told me it would be hard, and that hard is not a sign to stop. But I didn't know that on the Thursday when I slammed the notebook shut and went to watch TV with the day's entries half finished. Week 3 almost killed the whole thing. Not because of pain. Pain is at least energy. You can be angry and still show up. The dangerous part was the boredom. Boredom is quieter than pain. It doesn't announce itself. It just slowly makes the notebook feel optional. I skipped Monday, told myself I'd catch up tomorrow. Skipped Tuesday too. Wednesday I skipped on purpose, with a clear thought. Maybe I've gotten what I needed out of this. I understand my patterns now. 2 weeks of data is probably enough. Maybe I should switch to once a week. Maybe monthly. Maybe. Maybe is how habits die, and then I caught myself in the middle of a thought I recognized immediately. The thought was, well, here you go again. Started something, quit something. Just like the Mint app. Just like the NAB. Just like the spreadsheet. Just like every other thing you've decided you were going to do, and then stopped when it got boring. That thought didn't motivate me. It infuriated me. But not at the notebook, at the pattern. I had become someone who starts things and doesn't finish them. And this wasn't about money anymore. It was about who I was as a person. It was about whether my word meant anything, even to myself, especially to myself. I didn't go back to the notebook because I was inspired. I went back because I was sick of being the guy who quits. I sat down that Wednesday night and filled in 3 days from the bank app. It took about 15 minutes, and something caught my attention immediately. In the 3 days I hadn't been tracking, I'd spent noticeably more than usual. Not dramatically, but measurably. Like my brain, freed from the knowledge that it would have to account for every purchase at the end of the day, had loosened its grip. Things that usually gave me a half-second of hesitation, adding guacamole, upgrading to the larger size, clicking buy now instead of save for later. Those hesitations just weren't there. That was the first moment I actually thought, maybe this isn't pointless. Maybe the point isn't the recording. Maybe the point is knowing that the recording is coming. Week 4 started quietly. No dramatic breakthrough. No music swells moment. I just kept going, sitting down every evening, opening the notebook, writing things out, and somewhere around day 22 or 23, I noticed something weird. I was spending less, not because I'd set a budget, not because I'd made a goal, not because I'd done anything strategic at all. I was spending less because in the moment of purchase, in that specific half-second where you're about to tap your card or click buy, a small, quiet thought appeared. Tonight, I'm going to have to write this down. That's all. Not, I can't afford this. Not, I need to save money. Just, tonight this goes in the notebook. And that thought would trigger a second one. Do I actually want this? Not can I afford it, but do I want to see this in my notebook later? Which sounds a little absurd, but it worked. The notebook had become a witness. And when you know your decisions have a witness, even if that witness is just a bent notebook on your kitchen table, you make different decisions. Day 24. I almost ordered DoorDash, pulled up the app, had the restaurant picked out, was looking at the $33.40 total, and I thought, what am I going to write tonight? DoorDash $33 reason, didn't feel like making anything, and something in me went, nah, not because I couldn't afford it. I could, but I didn't want that to be tonight's entry. I made pasta with olive oil and Parmesan, cost me maybe $2, and I felt not proud, that's too big a word. I felt surprised. Like, oh, apparently I can make a choice, a real conscious choice. Not out of fear or scarcity, but because I actually thought it through. That feeling, that small, quiet surprise of I can actually choose, is the most underrated thing in personal finance. Everyone talks about motivation, discipline, systems, strategies. Nobody talks about the moment you realize you have agency over your own decisions, and that you don't want half the things you've been buying on autopilot. By the end of week 4, the notebook had become something different. It wasn't a ledger. It wasn't an accounting exercise. It was a record of my decisions, and for the first time I was making decisions instead of just reacting. Money had stopped feeling like something that flows through me without my control. I could see the flow, and once you can see it, you can start redirecting it. Here's what I actually changed. Not a 12-step overhaul, just 3 specific things that came directly from what I saw in the notebook. First, subscriptions. I went through every recurring charge and matched it to actual usage. I found 7 subscriptions I'd either forgotten about or barely used. The Calm app I hadn't opened in 8 months, gone. The gym membership, replaced with a $0 running habit, and eventually, a cheaper climbing gym I actually liked. A streaming service that was basically just there, canceled. A few miscellaneous charges that I genuinely couldn't identify until I dug into my email history. Total monthly savings, $127. Not because I was being some extreme minimalist, because I stopped paying for things I'd forgotten I was paying for. Second, DoorDash and Uber Eats. Not cutting them out, but changing what they were for before they were the default. I'm tired, so DoorDash. It's late, so DoorDash. I had a hard day, so DoorDash. That's not a meal delivery service, that's emotional spending with a delivery fee attached. After the notebook, I started keeping it as an actual treat, a few times a month, when I genuinely wanted to order something specific, not just avoid cooking. Monthly spend dropped from something like $320 to under $80. Third, and this was the hardest one, I started asking myself a question before buying things, not can I afford it? That question has too easy an answer when you have a credit card with remaining balance. The question was, am I buying this because I need it or because I feel something? Tired, bored, stressed, lonely, FOMO from an Instagram ad. Most of the time, the honest answer was the second one, and once you can name it, the purchase loses its power. Not always, but often enough. On day 28, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I opened my Chase app and looked at my balance. Just looked at it. No stomach drop. No immediate urge to close the app and pretend I didn't see what I saw. I just looked. And the balance was fine. Not great. Not, I'm rich now. Just fine. Slightly better than it usually was at this point in the month. Not because I'd done anything dramatic. Because I'd been paying attention. I'm not going to tell you I paid off all my credit cards in 30 days. I didn't. It took me 11 months to get from $12,000 in credit card debt to under $3,000, and I still had rough months in there, months where something came up and I slipped back into old patterns. There were evenings where I wrote a number in the notebook and thought, well, there goes the progress. But the difference between those moments with the notebook and the months without the notebook was enormous. Because with the notebook, there goes the progress means I can see exactly what happened and I know what to adjust. Without the notebook, it just means everything is bad and I don't know why. Not because it hurts, because it gets boring. And boredom is more dangerous than pain when it comes to habits. When it gets boring, just remember, boredom is the exact point where most people stop, which means it's also the exact point where you get ahead of most people. Just keep showing up. 4. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a money expert. I'm a regular guy who was drowning 2 years ago, tried something stupidly simple, and stuck with it even when I hated it. The only thing I did right was not quitting. I'm not disciplined by nature. I'm not motivated by nature. I'm just someone who got tired enough of being the person who gives up. If you're where I was, this video found you for a reason. Give it 1 month, 30 evenings. If nothing changes, you've lost 5 minutes a day and $1. If it does change, you might lose the anxiety that's been living in the background of your whole life. Seems like a fair trade to me. If you want more of these honest, zero-hype conversations about money, subscribe. I'm not selling a course, a masterclass, or a financial freedom blueprint. I'm just telling you what actually worked for me. Maybe it'll work for you too. Drop a comment and let me know. Have you ever tried tracking your spending? And if yes, what day did you quit? I want to know because I almost quit on day 19. Almost. See you in the next one.